Among the many joyous renunciations brought us by the New World were the renunciation of exploitation, the renunciation of colonies, the renunciation of obligatory military service, the renunciation of secret diplomacy, secret assignments and transfers, the renunciation of secret police, the renunciation of divine law, and many, many other fairy tale renunciations in addition, but not, to be sure, a renunciation of prisons. So it must have seemed ridiculous not only to the prison keepers, but to the prisoners themselves that for some reason or other there was no punishment cell, that it should have been banned. For if you didn't intimidate the prisoner, if there was no further punishment you could apply, how could he be compelled to submit to the regimen? And where could you put the captured fugitives? What was the shizo given for? For whatever they felt like. You didn't please your chief, you didn't say hello the way you should have, you didn't get up on time, you didn't go to bed on time, you were late for roll call, you took the wrong path, you were wrongly dressed, you smoked where it was forbidden, you kept extra things in your barracks. Take a day, 3, 5. You failed to fulfill the work norm, you were caught with a broad, take 5, 7, or 10. And for work shirkers, there was even 15 days. And even though, according to the law, what law? 15 days was the maximum in penalty cells, though according to the corrective labor law of 1933, even that was impermissible. This accordion could be stretched out to a whole year. In 1932, in Demitlog, they used to give 1 year of shizo for self-mutilation, and if one bears in mind that they used to refuse treatment in such cases, then this meant they used to put a sick, wounded person in a punishment cell to rot for a whole year. What was required of a shizo? It had to be A, cold, B, damp, C, dark, D, forced starvation. Therefore, there was no heat, not even when the temperature outside was 22 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. They did not replace missing glass panes in the winter. They allowed the walls to get damp, or else they put the penalty block cellar in moist ground. The windows were microscopic, or else there were none at all, more usual. They fed a Stalin ration of 10.5 ounces a day, and issued a hot meal consisting of thin gruel only on the 3rd, 6th, and 9th days of your imprisonment there. But at Vorkutavam, they only gave 7 ounces of bread and a piece of raw fish in place of a hot dish on the 3rd day. This is the framework in which one has to imagine all the penalty cells. It is very naive to think that a penalty cell has of necessity to be like a cell, with a roof, door, and lock. Not at all. At Kuranak Sala, at a temperature of minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, the punishment cell was a sodden frame of logs. The free physician Andreev said, "I, as a physician, declare it possible to put a prisoner in that kind of punishment cell. Let us leap the entire archipelago. At Vorkutavam in 1937, the punishment cell for work shirkers was a log frame without a roof, and in addition, there was a plain hole in the ground. Arnold Rappaport lived in a hole like that. To get shelter from the rain, they used to pull some kind of a rag over themselves, like Diogenes in a barrel. In the Mariinsk camp, as in many others of course, there was snow on the walls of the punishment cell, and in such and such a punishment cell, the prisoners were not allowed to keep their camp clothes on, but were forced to undress to their underwear. The BUR, the strict regiment barracks, could be the most ordinary kind of barracks, set apart and fenced off by barbed wire, with the prisoners in it being taken out daily to the hardest and most unpleasant work in the camp. It could also be a masonry prison inside a camp with a full prison system, with beatings of prisoners summoned one by one to the jailer's quarters. A favorite method that didn't leave marks was to beat with a felt boot with a brick inside of it. With bolts, bars, locks, and peepholes on every door, with concrete floors to the cells, and an additional separate punishment cell for BUR inmates. The favored candidates for the penalty compounds were religious believers, stubborn prisoners, and thieves. Yes, thieves. Here the great system of indoctrination broke down because of the inconsistency of the local instructors. They kept whole barracks of nuns there who had refused to work for the devil, At the penalty camp for prisoners under convoy at the Pechora State Farm, they held them in a penalty block up to their knees in water. In the autumn of 1941, they gave them all 5814, economic counter-revolution, and shot them. They sent the priest, Father Viktor Shipovalnikov, there on charges of conducting religious propaganda. He had celebrated Vespers for 5 nurses on Easter Eve. And often prisoners were sent to penalty compounds for refusal to become informers. The majority died there and naturally cannot speak for themselves, and the murderers from state security are even less likely to speak of them. There were stories of women in this context too. It is impossible to reach a sufficiently balanced judgment on these stories because some intimate element always remains hidden from us. However, here is the story of Irina Nagel as she told it herself. She worked as a typist for the administrative section of the Ukta State Farm, in other words, a very comfortably established trustee. Heavy-set and imposing, she wore her hair in long braids wrapped around her head, and partly for convenience she went around in wide Oriental-type trousers and a jacket cut like a ski jacket. Whoever knows camp life will understand what an enticement this was. A security officer, Junior Lieutenant Sidorenko, expressed a desire to get more intimately acquainted, and Nagel replied, "I would rather be kissed by the lowliest thief in camp. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I can hear your baby crying in the next room." Repulsed by her outburst, the security officer suddenly changed his expression and said, "Surely you don't think I like you. I merely wanted to put you to the test. So here's the way it is. You must collaborate with us." She refused and was sent to a penalty camp.